Hey everybody, I've decided to make a really quick video explaining how I began making the Make A Safer workshops. I was asked that in the deprogramming group, and then I've been contacted by people that are still in AA. So I thought, let's just get into it. The way that it started is that a young woman, Callie, came to the meeting that I attended, about 40 women, and she talked about being harassed by a guy that had given her a ride from a meeting. And she was 21. She was like 90 days sober. He had 7 years and was in his late 20s. So basically, he drives her home, then he makes his way up, and then he doesn't leave. And he doesn't have a job, and she has a job, and she feels stuck and she doesn't know how to get him out. So it turns out that she starts to talk about how these meetings that she's going to, which are mixed meetings, and none of us were really going to those kind of meetings anymore because they actually were really kind of rough and creepy. That there's a lot of talk about predation and of sexual assault. So I start going to those meetings with her, and they look pretty bad, pretty rough. I wind up calling a friend of mine who worked in New York AA as a general service manager. You know, those people that make like 300,000 a year. They're like the CEO or the president of AA. I know there's many people who think that AA does not have that, but they do. And he told me about a guy who was a trustee at one time and a delegate in California for Alcoholics Anonymous named Paul. And Paul C. Had written a letter to the board, and he connected me. And I called Paul, and we had a conversation, and he sent me the letter. I got the letter, 7-page letter, which I will leave in a link below, and I cried. And it was a lot more than just sexual harassment. 13 stepping older member, a lot older member very often than very young member, very predatory about sexual assault. So I'm going to use that word instead of the other word just for YouTube guidelines for myself, but know that it is the R word, and that also child predation. So they would target women who were single, who had small children, and they were sexually, you know what I mean? And at the time, I called some of my friends in Hawaii, and they did confirm that, in fact, there were friends of ours that happened to when we were young and in our 70s, that there were women I knew who eventually became victims. So then what do I do is all right, so we decided we're going to have a meeting, and we have these meetings at my home group, and I start to go to meetings with Callie. And from that, I'm in contact a lot with Paul, and he says, I think you should have a workshop. And I said, okay, what is that? Have you ever done it? He said, no, but I can tell you how to do it. So he did. Now, if you want more details, you can email me in the link below, and I will tell you more details of how we did it. It was very, very simple. So we got a church, we got a flyer, and I started to go to meetings and make announcements. And that's when the hit the fan. So people went a little crazy and were like, what are you doing? That's an outside issue. You can't do that. And I was like, yeah, we can do that. Okay. So I've spoken to delegates in AA, I've spoken to trustees in AA, and I've spoken to the guy who runs AA in New York and who ran it for 10 years and said, of course we can have a workshop about safety. What are you guys, like, crazy? So then, okay, so it just gets okay. So then what happens next is that I go to Hawaii, and I'm there for like I went for a conference. I didn't really like the conference, but it was an AA thing. And I'm sitting with like all these old timer friends of mine, and they said, "Oh, Monica, did you hear what happened? Like there was this murder, and it involved this beautiful, 40-year-old woman and her 9-year-old daughter who was murdered by a guy that she knew from AA." And I was like, "Well, how did she meet him? Like, did was she dating him?" So it turns out that she was not. He was stalking her, and he was court ordered there by a healthcare professional and a judge. I'm going to repeat that. He, the violent offender, was court ordered to Alcoholics Anonymous by a judge and a healthcare professional, which was being done all over the place. It's still being done all over the place. But back in 2009, when I first discovered this, or was it 2010? Anyway, I think it was 2010, that none of us knew. None of us knew that this court ordering was going on. And it had been going on for decades. So a lot of the guys play the game and like, oh, I got a drinking problem. I need to go to AA. So they avoid prison time. So I did a lot of investigation. There was a lot of stuff on the internet that time. I think it was the Honolulu Advertiser actually had a story about her. We found it on the internet. At first, they didn't mention AA. The second article, the follow-up, did mention Alcoholics Anonymous. So he not only he killed her, 9-year-old, and the dog. Disgusting. And then he killed himself. It is a very, very shocking story. Kind of rocked Honolulu. I went to I went back there like I think a year later to see where I could see where this meeting was at the Kahala Mall outside, but I think that's another story. So I come back home and I'm in one of the blogs that was like a stinking thinking back that it was the name of it that time. And one of the guys reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, Monica, there's been another murder that's A related and it's right in your area." So it was Santa Clarita, and this was Karla's story. So Karla Brada, I got to know her parents well. They are in the movie, my movie, The 13 Step. And so she knew him for 4 months and she was dead. This guy had like 50 times he was a violent offender. I mean, I sat through the whole trial. He was convicted 25 years to life. I hope he stays in there, doesn't get an early release. I pray and hope. And he used that I'm a drunk card over and over again. And Karla went to a rehab, which was really just a house in a neighborhood, which took insurance. And then they drove them to this other place that was this community of sober living. It was connected with, I think, a non-denominational church. And she met him there. And nobody warned, like a normal, wonderful young woman, that there were men in there that were chronic violent offenders and scary, scary dudes. So Carla's killed, and yeah, I decided to make the movie as soon as Kristine and Saundra Cass, which were the mother and daughter, when they were killed in Honolulu, and that was it. That was the tipping point. That was like, I'm done. I became a GSR at the time and I went to the Santa Monica meetings. And when I told some women, they were like, oh, well, what does that have to do with Alcoholics Anonymous? And I was like, well, what do you mean? What does that have to do with Alcoholics Anonymous? And that was look on her face. That was it. That was just like the tipping point for me, along with the murder, that these people were so heartless and ruthless and cold, like ice in their veins, that I didn't want to be a part of this anymore. And I just really started to unravel. I really just like all the rose-colored glasses just like ripped off, and I felt like there were just layers and layers of belief systems that fell away. And when I would go to meetings, I would hear this stuff and I'd be like, well, that's not really true. And well, that's not really true. And then I looked around the room and I would see these people like going, oh, yeah, yeah. When they'd read like chapter 5, and they would read it in that droning on way. But anyway, I digress. So I had the workshops. I began to write literature. The women in my group gave me input. And then what happened is that there was a PRASA, which is a Pacific Regional AA Service Assembly, where there's like 500 people come from the whole region. That's 7 states, 13 regions in the west coast of the United States, including Hawaii. And they came to the airport area in a hotel where there was a 3-day conference. And the husband and wife team that were in charge put on the agenda at the very last minute, talking about 13 stepping and sexual predation in AA in the rooms. And so there was a group, and it was like a lot of people, like over 100 people, like squished into this room. And there was a talk for 2 hours, and we were not in charge. There was somebody else put in charge that should have been documented, and it wasn't, but we took notes. And horrific, horrible stuff was shared there by people who lost loved ones, people who committed suicide after being 13 stepped, and then lots of other really scary, violent stuff that people were talking about. People coming into meetings and like pulling out a gun and just like putting it in their lap and sitting there. I mean, it was like bizarre. It was really, really crazy. So then here's like this last part of this. I think these are the last two items I want to touch on, is that the Spanish speaking community was having like a special little meeting. And I went up to that hospitality room and I was getting some coffee. And I think I was talking to Shane, who had helped a lot. And oh, I forgot another part of this, which is the 502. It was the 502 Club out in West Covina where he and another old timer woman, we helped catch a rapist. And he was, it was really bad, sober living out there. And so we all, as activists, I guess we helped stop. We helped get him arrested, is what happened, and called the police and had people help. And the police showed up at that clubhouse. They arrested him. And there's more to that story, but I'm not going to go into it like all of it right now. The thing is that okay, so we went to that nighttime workshop, and so I'm in the hospitality room, and the Spanish people said, "Will you please come over and explain to our little group?" It was about 10 people what you're doing, and we're going to translate because everybody was Spanish speaking, and not everybody did speak English well. So I explained what I was doing, and then they started telling me stories. And this is the story that is the craziest. So they said, well, right now we have an old timer, and I don't know if he was 30 or 40 years sober, but highly respected. You know how these guys become. And that he was taking up into he was taking them up into the mountains to read their fifth step to him, and then when they were done, they had to have sex with him. I was like, wait, no, like where? Like in Mexico? And they're like, no, like right here in California. And I was like, oh my God, holy. So they were like, yeah. And so I was like, okay. And I already had like the beginning of the pamphlet, and they said, well, can we take this literature? We're going to blow it up. We're going to make, poster, and we'll make flyers in Spanish. I said, take it, do it. And they were from the Inland Empire. They were not from the LA area. They were just probably from Riverside, San Bernardino. So that was that. Okay. After that happened, I called my friend who was once the CEO or the general manager of AA in New York, and I told him, I said, you need to get people who are from New York, and they need to come out here and they need to investigate what's going on here. This is criminal, what's going on here. And so another point I want to make is that people have sued and tried to sue AA. But if you are in a sober living or you are in a rehab and you are sexually harassed, and it's allowed by, like, say, the people who are running it, you can sue them. It's civil. It's a civil offense. Of course, if it's sexual assault, then it's a criminal offense. And I've supported and helped other people who finally did go to the police and needed support. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of women that didn't stand up for women. It's pretty disgusting. So I think what to finish it up, to wrap this up, is that the safety workshops started to happen like all around. There was people had it here and there, and I went to some, and but I think the ones that I really ran were the beginning were really effective as sort of really sparking the conversation and getting it out in the light of day where people felt like they could talk about it and people would really stand up. And the last one is when we went to this meeting that was huge on a Friday night in Westwood up by UCLA, where there were like 300 people there on Friday night, and it was known as the pickup place where everybody went to meet, and there were a lot of young, beautiful people there. And I stood on the stage and took a cake, and I was already gone. I already left AA. At that time, it was like 36 years. And I had a minute, and I just talked about the 13 stepping and sexual predation, and that we were raising awareness about it. When I walked down, the people were going crazy. Like there were people trying to drag me out, grab my arm, and my husband had to like swat him off and say, "Leave her alone. She's my wife." And he's like, "She's not your wife." And he's like, "Yeah, she's my wife." And then there were people like getting up and yelling and pointing and saying, "He's a 13 stepper." And it was pretty wild. So we leave and we don't stay for the rest of the meeting. And we go down to the parking structure where we see two young, beautiful ladies. They're probably in their early 20s. And she was crying and she said, "Thank you so much. I was by an old timer there." And I said, "Did you go to the police?" And she said, "No, but thank you for what you are doing." So with that, I'm going to finish it up. I had made a previous video. I did not like the way it came out, and so I'm just decided to do another one where it's a little more compact. If in looking at this later, I need to do like a part two, I'll do it. If not, have a great day. God bless. And you can reach me at makeaasafer@gmail.com. And I do not friend everybody that is on Facebook. That's where I'm at. But you can, if you message me, or you can come, you can try to get into the group, the deprogramming group, deprogramming from AA or any 12-step group. All right, great. Have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.